Have you ever thought about your communication style and how you communicate? Let's find out how we can communicate better.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hey, Giant Builders, don't forget, I have a free PDF on 5 home businesses. Link is below. Let's meet Traci. Hey, Giant Builders, welcome. I am so happy to have you here today. I am really excited. We are going to talk communication, and this is Traci Poe. Hi, Traci, how are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
I am doing really good. Thank you.
Good,
Can you
good.
tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So, how far back do you want to go? I could go really far back.
How about
But
age 6?
so, I have been or had been in the nonprofit world for well over 20 plus years. But before that, I was actually working on my master's degree. And one of my courses, I had to do a project. And so I chose to do a workshop for some of the students on campus. And at that point, I was just hooked. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to work with people on their communication skills. So whether it's for work or for your personal life, I help people to be able to connect with others at a deeper level and to build those stronger relationships all through effective communication skills. But that could be everything from if you have a message you want to get out to the world, it's helping you with your public speaking or presentation building, to those interpersonal communication skills. And I'm hoping we can talk about some of those today.
Okay.
So that's what I do. Started Communicate Great after I got out of the nonprofit world. And so that's it. Communicate Great.
All right. So what's the process to communicate great?
So it really depends on, again, are you talking to me about wanting to build your professional skills or your personal skills? So it all depends on what our goals are or what your goals are. And then we just kind of work from there. But I do it through multiple ways. We can do one-on-ones, we can do online course, we can do group. I've just launched several months ago a community called Know Thyself, a glow and grow community. And so that community is about getting to know who you are, because until you recognize who you are, you can't grow. And so that not only includes the areas that you need to grow in, but what your strengths are as well. So that is another way that we work with people. And I'm about to actually launch another community for public speakers. So there you go.
So how do we find out who we are?
So one of the things that we do in the Know Thyself community is I am big into assessments, right? I said, you have to know who you are before you can grow. And so, for instance, one of the things I love, love, love to talk about is the 5 love languages.
Oh.
And there is a 5 love language, yes, assessment. And Dr. Gary Chapman was actually the person that came up with this. And what he is a counselor. And so he had spoken to so many couples, and he started noticing that they didn't feel loved by their partner. And so he culled through all of his notes and put some things together. And he started figuring out that most people fit into one of these 5 categories as their strongest love language. And so he has an assessment that you can take, and you can find out what your stronger love languages are. And so that's one of the things I love to talk about. But that's an example of doing assessments, kind of doing the work. And actually in that Know Thyself community, we bring community experts and guest experts in to talk about different things. I have somebody who will be coming in talking about Enneagram. And I've heard about Enneagrams for years, but I really didn't know much about it. And I had her on my podcast, the Communicate Great podcast. Little plug, go check it out. But she talked about Enneagrams, and it was like light bulbs just started, boo, boo, boo. So anyhow, it was really great. But that is one way. And so, yeah, just checking yourself out, doing assessments. And then from there, you can figure out where you need to grow, what your strengths are, and where you can really build on those.
So what's your love language?
My strongest two love languages, words of affirmation. When I feel seen and recognized by somebody, man, that sets me soaring. And also I would say physical touch is another. Give me a hug. I'm a hugger. And so I'm going to hug you. If my husband and I are having, just a movie night or whatever, I'm going to be sitting right beside him. So those are my two strongest. Interesting. And I would say do assessments regularly. Don't say, oh, I've done the love language assessment 20 years ago. And no, we evolve, we change. That's exactly what Know Thyself is about, helping you grow in the areas you want to grow in. And so I would say do them again. But so I would say that the last time I took it, my lowest love language was giving and receiving gifts. I was like almost zero on that one. And I love giving gifts. So I was kind of surprised at that one, but yeah, anyhow.
Mine is service.
Okay. Acts of service.
And it kind of, so my husband thinks that he's having me feel very loved by servicing him a lot. So sometimes I have to remind him, yes, sometimes I like to be serviced too.
Right, exactly. Yeah. What can you do to help me take something off my plate? So, and that's actually another thing that I talk about with people is kind of the caveat. So it's giving and receiving. And whether you're doing Enneagram or listening styles or conflict styles or love languages or DISC or all of the so many assessments, there's even an apology one. You have to learn. No, it's important to learn about all of them so that you can speak those other love languages. So what is your husband's primary love language?
Touch.
Touch. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but I'm hoping today, I don't know if you have another question for me, but you talk about how do we get to know ourselves? And so actually that's something I really want to talk about today is all about knowing when we're making assumptions and kind of some communication-based solutions to that. So I don't know if you have other questions, but that has been heavy on my heart.
Okay, let's go there.
Okay, yay, thank you.
Yeah.
So many people have damaged or destroyed relationships because of false or harmful assumptions. So because I'm a question asker, I want to ask you, do you have an example of a time in your life where someone made an assumption about you that was just wrong? And how did that impact you?
Okay, yeah. I mean, even still, I mean, and it came up mostly in college, but even now, I'm a really quiet person and I like to kind of like be at the corner and just kind of watch people and listen to people. And that's been interpreted as that I have been stuck up and unfriendly, and which is completely not who I am. I mean, I am a true blue friend, but it does take me a little bit of time to get to know people. So I've been interpreted as not being a friendly or a stuck-up person.
And so what was the harmful side of that? What was the negative impact on you having people misjudge you because of their assumptions?
it really hurt my feelings because it's like, well, just because I'm quiet doesn't mean that I think I'm better than people or anything like that. So it's kind of like, it's like, well, that's not fair. You didn't even get to know me to find out what I really like.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It's interesting because I actually had something like that happen to me when I was in college, kind of the same thing. I am actually a really huge introvert, and
Mhm.
that's one of the things that I talk to people about when I talk about public speaking, because so many people have that fear of getting their message out, but yet everybody has a message to share with the world. And so because I'm such of an introvert, I was much the same way. And I had people doing the same. They assumed I was fake or stuck up.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I just wanted to be in the corner, hiding out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. I get that being misjudged. So if let's talk about definitions of assumption. And so this is my definition. This is not what you would find, in the dictionary, but this is my definition. And that is when an assumption is when people jump to a conclusion and they don't have all of the information,
Yeah.
and then they believe that judgment or that jumping to that conclusion as if it's fact. And I'll give you another example of how I've seen this play out. I've been around someone who will say something like, well, I bet they dot 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 dot. And then all of the sudden, this assumption of how somebody behaved or what somebody did, remember, they jumped to a conclusion, not even witnessing anything.
Mhm.
And now they're spreading that around as if it was fact.
Yeah.
I've seen that over and over and over. And man, that does some damage. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to give you an example of what could be a good assumption, because assumptions can be false and harmful, or there is also the good in assumption, right? Like we have perceptions and we make judgment calls all the time. Like think about from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you're making those judgment calls, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to say all assumptions are bad. So I want to just kind of give an example. So if I see a tornado coming straight at me, I'm in Texas and I grew up in Oklahoma, I mean tornado alley.
Mhm.
So if I see a tornado heading to me, my assumption is going to be that will hurt me, right? And so there is something innate in us in our survival that makes assumptions as to what is safe and unsafe. So I am not saying all assumptions are bad, but I want to talk about how bad they can be, because again, they can destroy relationships, whether it's at work or whether it's in your personal life. So I want to talk about three problems that can happen from those false assumptions, those harmful assumptions. And so, are there more than these three problems I'm going to talk about? Yes. You and I were talking earlier, and I just want to share that, when we do guest spots on podcasts, we really can only go a mile wide. We can't go a mile deep, right? So there are so many more problems, but I just want to hit some prevalent ones and then we'll go into some solutions. So in the workplace, we talked about professional and personal. In the workplace, harmful assumptions, false assumptions can lead to a very toxic environment. And I don't know if you have any examples of that you want to share. I'm just kind of throwing things at you. I don't know if you have one that you can think of off the top of your head. If you can't, that's fine.
Yeah, there was a company that I worked with in that the owner was kind of just all over the place, just bouncing just from one point to another point and everything. It was just really hard to keep up with him. And he was making some assumptions about one of the other workers because the one employee was real quiet. And so when the owner was talking, he would be kind of like sitting there, kind of like looking down and such. And the owner assumed that he just wasn't listening or that he was playing on his phone or something like that. But he was just really, that was kind of like his processing, the way he processed. So it kind of ended up that the employee, I kind of had to talk to the employee and say, here's what you need to do so that he doesn't feel that way. And so it's just kind of, he made a wrong, the owner made a wrong assumption about him because of the way he processed things.
Yes, that is a great example. And when we get to the solutions, there are some things that the owner could definitely have done differently. And so we'll talk about that in a second. But so it can lead to a toxic environment at work, and the ways that that could present itself is wasted time, wasted company time, gossiping, right? I was saying, I know the person that will just think, well, I bet they did this or that, not even having anything to base that on.
Yeah.
And then they start talking to people as if it is fact. And so that is the perfect example of wasted time gossiping at desks, at the cooler, or wherever. And then that also can lead to conflicts between employees or even management, top down. It sounds like your example was top down. So that can lead to conflict, which then hurts the efficiency of that company, right? More wasted time and money. And then you have the damage to a reputation. So if your owner would have been telling everybody in the company, oh, he doesn't care about what I'm saying, he isn't listening, that person's reputation would have been damaged based on a false assumption, a harmful assumption. So a second problem that I want to talk about is, again, whether it's in our personal life or in our professional life, we lose trust in people based on that incorrect assumption. So going back to your example, if your owner would have started spreading these rumors about that employee, it's damaged the reputation, but now people don't really trust that person, right? And so, and it can be that way at home as well, or in our personal lives. The person who would say, I bet he or she did this or that, and just like fabricated that essentially. Now you have people who don't want to trust that person, that the first person just concocted this scenario up, right? So you have people who lose trust in the person that was said about. And so that is also very, very damaging. And the third problem that I want to talk about is really in our personal lives. And so again, these false assumptions, these harmful assumptions can damage and they can destroy our relationships because we assume what someone's motives are. We assume what their thoughts are. We assume what their feelings are. We assume what their actions are, right? And these assumptions can lead to frustration and conflict. I've had somebody in my personal world who makes assumptions on a regular basis as to what my motives are, what is in my heart when I say or do something. And so that has led to great frustration on my part because 99.9999% of the time, their assumption about my motivation is wrong. So that has been highly frustrating, highly damaging. So do you have any questions or thoughts before we move to some communication-based solutions?
No, I think that's all great information. I really enjoyed all that.
Okay, good. So I want to now talk, because I'm Communicate Great, right? And I work with people on leveling up their communication skills. I want to talk about some communication-based solutions to handling these false assumptions, these harmful assumptions. And so we can't control anybody else, right?
I
but
would.
we but we can control ourselves. And
Mhm.
so all of these solutions are based on how we handle our own assumptions, our own false and harmful assumptions. So the first one is kind of going back to that know thyself thought of you have to pay attention to yourself and learn who you are to grow. It's in that vein. So we have to pay attention to ourselves. We have to be very aware, or at least start becoming aware of those assumptions that we make
Mhm.
that may be false. So pay attention to your self-talk and to the stories that you tell yourself. Another thing is, what are you assuming about that person's motives, thoughts, feelings, actions? So flip it around. What are you assuming,
Yeah.
right? What stories are you telling yourself that play into those assumptions on your part? And then think about what prejudgments you have. Have you heard of the halo effect and the horn effect?
I have not.
So it is something that I taught public speaking in college for 10 years, and I also taught interpersonal communication for 10 years in college. And I love both classes tremendously. But the halo effect and the horn effect is something that we would talk about in the interpersonal communication class. And think about as I'm talking about these, think about if you do either of them
Okay.
and what that looks like. I'm so glad that you're game for me asking you questions. So I'm going to start with the horn effect. The horn effect is where you just don't care for somebody, right? You just don't
Okay.
like them.
Okay.
And no matter what they do, what their motive, their feeling, their thought, their action, it doesn't matter what they do, you are going to look at them in a negative light. So let's say you have somebody, you're just like, I just don't like you. And they're in a traffic accident. Your
Uh,
first thought must be, what did they do? Right? What
yeah.
did they do?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about the halo effect. This is for somebody that they can do no wrong in your eyes. You just love them to death. They are just the greatest person ever, right? They
Mhm.
can do no wrong. They're in a traffic accident, and your first thought is,
What did the
what
other
did
person do?
what did the other person do?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And so when you have that halo effect going on for somebody, or that horn of, or that the halo or the horn effect, you know, think about how that could impact you. And
Mhm.
so do you have any examples of that before I quickly go on to numbers 2, 3, and 4?
I do, but I probably will not talk about them.
Okay. Okay. So let's go to solution number 2. And this is a
Okay.
big one. Ask questions. Ask direct questions. Did this happen? Did that happen? Did you say this? Were you thinking this? Were you feeling this? So there's something called direct perception checking and indirect perception checking. That's a whole other thing. I'm just going to go to direct perception checking. Direct perception checking is when you kind of watch something going on and
Okay.
you go to somebody and you say, here's what I saw. I was thinking it could be this. I was thinking it could be that. Tell me what you were thinking, feeling, motivation, all of that, right?
Okay.
And give them a chance to answer you. That
Mm,
is direct perception checking. That is a massive tool in
mm.
your everyday life. Then there's the paraphrasing questions. So I notice you have a red nose. Are you feeling sad? You're sniffing. Are you feeling sad? Well, no, actually, I have a cold. Oh, okay, right? So that's perception checking and paraphrasing what somebody might be feeling or thinking, what their motivation was. So just go ask questions,
Yeah.
right? Solution number 3, when we are dealing with conflict as a result of this, be aware of our emotions and think about setting our emotions aside and just focusing on the fact, right? Because
Mhm.
emotions can get us going, and that's a whole other thing as well. And the fourth and final solution that I want to talk about that is communication based is apologize. If you're the one who's made the assumption, if you're the one who has used the harmful or the false assumption and that has done damage to somebody, own it. Go and say, I'm sorry. And this is what I did. And I can't imagine how it made you feel. And then be specific about what you did and the impact that you see has happened and take responsibility. I know that a lot of times when people apologize, they will turn it back on the other person.
No.
But you, that's not owning it, right? That's now blaming the other person. So we have to take responsibility when we apologize and own it and don't turn it back on the other person, right? And so as you're apologizing, just be very specific about what you did and how you feel like it may have impacted them. And this is a great time to go back to those, ask the questions. If you're looking to mend that relationship, which is really important, you need to just do more than say, I'm sorry, right?
Yeah.
So those are the 4 communication-based solutions for you making those false assumptions that are harmful. So there you go, 3 problems and 4 solutions for harmful false assumptions.
It's like my grandchildren, he's like, well, tell them you're sorry. I'm sorry. All right, say it like you mean it. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes. I doubt you've ever heard this song, but when my kids were little, and all of our kids are adults now, but so when my kids were little, there was a song, and I can't remember who the artist was. He was a man and he sang songs just for children.
Okay.
And there was a song, and it was something like basically, tell them you're sorry, and I'm not. That's what the child would say, but I'm not. And so it was like the mom said, tell them you're sorry, or the teacher or something. And it kept escalating, going up the chain to,
Yeah.
and then they went to this person, well, tell them you're sorry. And then it ended up in front of a judge. And the judge said, well, tell them you're sorry. And then the judge said, are you, and the child said, I'm sorry. And the judge said, are you really sorry? Are you really, really sorry? Are you really, really, really sorry? And the child said, no, I'm not. And that's how the song ends. So, yes, you have to have a sincere apology. So, thank you for bringing that up. It needs to be sincere.
Uh-huh.
So, because people can see through fake all day long. So,
Oh, such great information. I'm
yeah.
going to go back and review this so I can and take notes and go from there. So
Good.
tell us about your podcast.
Okay, so the Communicate Great podcast. So it started with just my daughter and I. She was, or one of my daughters, she
Mhm.
was helping me. She was helping do some marketing, and it was her idea to start this podcast. And I said, okay, well, yeah, that's on my list of things to do down the line. She's like, no, we're starting it today. So anyhow, so she and I did it for a while, but she's a realtor and she has outgrown me. She just does not have time for me anymore. So now what I do is I bring on guests, but whether it's Emma and I, or I'm bringing on a guest, and I believe you're coming up very soon on my podcast, and I'm really looking forward to that. So everything is in service of what are some tips and some tricks to help our listeners with their communication. And
Mhm.
so it's the Communicate Great podcast, and you can find it in all the places. But every single guest that I bring on, I ask them, share with us your tips, whatever their topic is, whatever their niche is, they get to share some expertise in the communication field, even if they're not in the communication field. So that's what we do. It's great stuff. I bring on some really incredible guests.
I bet you get a lot of great tips.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, some great conversations.
I mean, communication is something we all do. Why is it so hard?
Gosh. Exactly. And we could go into, I could pull up my flip chart and I could draw the model and talk about all of the moving parts, right? There are
Yeah.
so many moving parts to communicating effectively. You've got your sender, you've got your receiver, you've got your noise, you've got, I mean, just so many things. So to answer your question without going into it,
Mhm.
it's hard because there are so many moving parts
Mhm.
and different people involved.
Yeah. I find that sometimes not all the information is shared.
Yes.
We kind of had a recent episode with our family that some information was shared with somebody, but some information wasn't shared with other person. And so then it was like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't know even where we are with this
Right.
project,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. Yes. Well, now you have some tools to go figure it out. You can do some
Mhm.
direct perception checking,
Yeah.
some paraphrasing. So,
Yeah.
it really is hard. And you know what? Even communicating with yourself, that self-talk, it's called intrapersonal communication. So, interpersonal communication is communicating with somebody of value, right? That message is of value. Intrapersonal is when you're communicating with yourself, that self-talk. And if you even think about just you communicating with yourself, that can be an issue by itself. Now you start adding in other people and it can get real complicated.
Oh yeah, we say so many harmful things to ourselves. And
Yes,
why is that? I mean, we know that we're God's creation. Why would we put down God's creation?
right. Exactly. And that has actually been a topic on some of my podcasts is those times when you talk about yourself in such a negative, degrading way, like sitting there and saying, I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so ugly. I'm so ugly. I'm so, and I have to say that I believe everybody falls into that. I fall into that. So yes, I don't know other than society can be hard on us. Let's talk about society for a second as women. This was a whole other topic in my interpersonal comm class, talking about those assumptions and the negative self-talk. We look at ourselves and we compare ourselves to so many other things or people or models or whether it's our business or whatever it is. And what we fail to see is that's not reality, most likely.
Mhm.
Even these reality TV shows,
Oh yeah, they're not real.
no, no. So we find ourselves comparing ourselves to that touched up picture of that model who is really heavier than what that picture is showing. They've airbrushed some stuff away. They've airbrushed pimples, wrinkle. I mean, so we go around comparing ourselves to what we think is a better version of who we are
Mhm.
or than who we are. And we just got to give ourselves some grace and mercy. And yes, realize that we are children of God
Mhm.
and He created us for purpose. And so, yeah, that is a great question.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, I have so enjoyed our time. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Other than just pay attention, now we're talking about self to pay attention to that self-talk, whether it's related to those assumptions or just in how you're talking to yourself. We can really get ourselves worked up over things that may not even ever happen,
Yeah.
right? Like public speaking, oh, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna flop, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But it hasn't even happened yet, right? And so there's a whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing, which is a whole other topic. So I would just say pay attention to your own self-talk,
Mhm.
especially as it relates to making those harmful or negative assumptions about ourselves or somebody else.
Great. All right, I'm going to have your information below. Thank you
Great.
so much. I really appreciated your information. It was very, very helpful.
I so appreciate you bringing me on. Obviously, you can tell I love talking about communication. It just gets me so excited. So anytime I can help somebody else, man, I'm all about that. So yes, thank you very much, Lois, for having me on to your podcast. And I'm really looking forward to you coming on to mine.
Thank you. All right, giant builders. See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.